So, you want to take pictures of the moon, but you're not sure about the camera settings. Well, I'm here to talk about the ideal camera settings for best possible results. So first, we need to understand what the camera settings actually do. We have three main settings, which are ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. So turn your camera to manual mode. Let's first go over aperture. The aperture of a lens quite simply means the opening through which light passes into the camera. The wider the opening, the more light can reach the camera sensor. And the smaller the opening, the less light it will collect. Alright, so the aperture in your camera settings is the f-stop. The lower the f-stop, the more light can reach the camera sensor. And vice versa, the higher the f-stop, the less light can reach the sensor. Next we have ISO. ISO can get really complicated if you dive deep into it, but simply explained, ISO affects the brightness on your image. And if you crank a really high ISO, that will introduce a lot of noise, which we don't want. So we want to keep really low ISO. And the last setting is shutter speed, aka exposure time. Shutter speed determines how long the shutter is open in your camera. The longer it's open, the more it will collect light. When you use long exposure time, the brighter your image will get, and if there is any movement in your setup, even tiny bit of movement, it will show in your image. Now we have understanding of the camera settings. Let's next talk about the subject we are photographing, which is the moon. So the Earth is rotating, which means the moon is moving in the sky. When you stare at the moon, it's really hard to detect any movement, but when we use high magnification instruments, the movement effect will also magnify. Okay, we know the moon is moving in the sky, and that means that we are going to use very fast shutter speed, so the image will be as sharp as possible. The shutter speed you are going to use depends on your conditions. For example, are you shooting during sunset or what phase the moon is at? In other terms, how bright the moon is. But ideally you want to use at least 1/25th of a second and go a little bit faster if you can. Shutter speed is the most important setting in this kind of photography. When the moon is moving and there is atmospheric turbulence, which causes the wavy effects on the surface of the moon, it's really important that we can capture really quick image. At this point you might wonder, do I need a star tracker or equatorial mount to track the moon? And my personal opinion is that tracker is really handy in this kind of photography, because without it you just need to constantly move your camera, because the moon will drift away from your frame really quickly. But if you are around 600mm focal length range, you can take pictures of the moon without tracker. You just need to. But if you go higher than that, then you should really consider a star tracker or equatorial mount. So, fast shutter speed, next ISO. If you are shooting at night, the moon is really bright, which is a good thing because that allows us to use low ISO. Generally, try to stick with ISO 100 to 400. If you can use ISO 100, use that. We don't want any extra noise. When you are taking photos of the moon, there are ideal settings what to use, but the accurate settings all comes down to your conditions and gear. So I can't say one specific setting and that will work for every situation, because it won't. This applies to your f-stop as well. For different gear there may be different sweet spots to get the sharpest result, but this as well is something you need to test out. But somewhere between f5.6 and f7.1 is usually ideal. So, fast shutter speed, low ISO, and try to find your f-stop sweet spot. Remember that there is no one correct setting for every situation. There are the ideal settings, and after that it's just fine-tuning the settings. Anyway, I hope this video helped you. Thank you guys for watching, and go out there and take photos of the moon. Clear skies.